Thank you, Jessica. I want to first of all say good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I would like to start off by thanking the Arlington Historical Society for this invitation to present this evening. As Jessica said, my name is Dale Smith. I'm a retired Fire EMS Battalion Chief. During my 31 years on the department, unfortunately, I did not know of all of the rich history and legacy that Station 8 represented and that they provided for this county. Just recently as 2018, Station 8 celebrated its 100th year in existence. This was marked by a celebration sponsored by the John M. Langston Civic Association, the association that where Station 8 resides. It was during this celebration I found out a lot of history was not available on Station 8. And I was a little dismayed at that. So I decided to do some research myself on the station and some of its founding members. And this evening, we'll share with you some of that information and a little snapshot of the history that I located. Our agenda for this evening, we're going to discuss the Halls Hill community, the formation of Station 8, and my favorite part, I get to talk to two of my heroes, two trailblazers of the Halls Hill Volunteer Fire Department and the Arlington County Fire Department, retired Captain Hartman Reed and volunteer firefighter Jerome Smith, also known as my dad. So let's talk about the Halls Hill community. It was established in 1866. It was a former plantation, 327-acre plantation, owned by a guy named Basil Hall. Mr. Hall was renowned for not being a really nice guy, and he was very harsh on the slaves that he owned at that time. So following the Civil War, Mr. Hall was broke. He needed money, and he was forced to sell his property. So he tried to sell it all at once and was unsuccessful. So he decided to divide it up in lots, and he sold to free slaves, newly freed slaves. And this was the beginning of the Halls Hill community. The Halls Hill community was a very self-sufficient community. It was because of necessity. It was a lot of laws that regulated their interaction with whites and blacks and actually really set up to disenfranchise African Americans. So they had to start their own churches, businesses, barbershops, fire departments. Some of the notable establishments on the Halls Hill community was Mount Salvation Baptist Church, which is located on Culpeper Street, the Callaway United Methodist Church, one that we don't have listed here, but was a big part of the community, is the Langston School, which still exists, as well as the Hicks store in the picture in the bottom there. In the Hicks store, the Hicks family had a very special relationship with the fire station because they donated all three pieces of property that Station 8 has called home since its existence. So let's talk about what was happening in the world when Station 8 was founded. I will let you know from the beginning, though, that this was a very rare instance for African American to form anything, because like I've said before, it was against the law in a lot of places for them to have any type of businesses or organizations like this. So for them to form the fire department in 1918 was quite remarkable. And one thing that a lot of people like for me to tell everybody is that this was known as the first African-American station south of the Mason-Dixon line. So what was happening? We had the Spanish flu. The Spanish flu was very similar to what's happening today with the COVID-19 pandemic. It was very
imagine everything good.
It was very hard for a lot of Americans. Over 500,000 Americans died of the Spanish flu. Also in 1919, you had race riots erupt across the country, including Washington, D.C. And these riots were caused by a couple of things. At that time, there was a great migration of African Americans from the South to the North to fill jobs because of the war. At the same time, you had soldiers returning from World War I, and they couldn't find jobs. So that created turmoil between whites returning from the war and African Americans coming up from the South working. In addition, you had World War I African American soldiers returning, and they were very proud of their accomplishments. They were wearing the uniforms, carrying guns, walking down the street, just, you know, parading. And a lot of white America was not fond of that. Also, you had, which, like I was just discussing, you had the end of World War I. We had African Americans for the first time were able to serve in the US military, even though they were segregated. It was the first time they were able to protect the US. Some of the notable African Americans during that time, in a regiment, I should say, was the Harlem Hellfighters. So what were the influences what influenced Station 8 being built? As I mentioned earlier, you had the Jim Crow laws that would disenfranchise African Americans, would keep them from organizing just about anything. And this was into play. This was the law of the land at the time. In addition, you had the Arlington Fire, which consisted of volunteers at that time. And the volunteers were very exclusive. There were no African Americans in the Arlington County volunteer segment at that time. And they very seldom responded to Halls Hill or the African American communities for emergencies. And when they did, the technology wasn't that good at that time. So the fire trucks weren't that fast, and they did very little when they arrived. So that was one of the things that influenced starting Station 8. On top of that, you had the Halls Hill community. Their infrastructure was poor. They had very poor roads. They had no running water. They didn't have lights. The construction of their homes were very poor. So that necessitated the need for a fire department. On top of that, you had Arlington County not providing a lot of basic resources to African American communities at that time in Arlington, and especially the Halls Hill community. So let's take a look at the Halls Hill community, I should say the Halls Hill Volunteer Fire Department when it started. In 1918, this two-wheel cart that you see in the red here was the first fire apparatus used by the Halls Hill Volunteer Fire Department. It was a two-wheel wagon that carried a 60-gallon chemical tank. This had to be pulled by 6 men over unpaved roads. This was a very tough job. I'm not sure I would have been a firefighter if I had to do such. This equipment was originally housed on the grounds of the Langston School because they didn't have a fire station to house it at. If you look at the top picture, this is a little illustration of what they were dealing with in Arlington at that time. The roads were dirt, homes were closely together, as well as the construction wasn't that good. 1925 for the Halls Hill Volunteer Fire Department consisted of them formally organizing. This is when they selected officers as well as trustees to administer the business of the fire department, of the fire station, I should say. This meeting, the first meeting for this was held in the home of Mr. James Moore, not James Moore that we all know that used to work here, but a guy named James Moore, and he lived in Boston, the Boston area of Arlington at that time. It was ironic he wasn't in the Halls Hill community. At the same time, there was another all African American formed in Arlington, and it was called the East Arlington Volunteer Fire Department. It was located where the Pentagon is now. This was one volunteer, all African American volunteer fire department was rare, but two was just almost unheard of. This station, unfortunately, didn't get a chance to stay around long because they were disbanded by the county manager in approximately 1941. So who were these gentlemen? They were sons of former slaves. They were community leaders, deacons, trustees in the churches. They were war heroes. One of them, he actually got a hero award in World War I from the Serbian government for his heroics during the war. Why the Serbian government? I have no idea. They were fathers, they were husbands, they were homeowners. A lot of them had businesses. There was a medical doctor, Dr. Edward T. Morton. He was the doctor for all of the African Americans, or I should say at that time how they referred to all of the Black people in Arlington. They were laborers and they were government workers. Interesting that 3 of them were the fathers of the original, let me see how to say this, the original 14 that were hired. They were the father of. So let's look at the station throughout the years. The first station in the top left, it's the original station that they had. It opened in 1927. And in front of it, it's their first fire truck, a 1917 Mitchell fire truck. On that little round thing on the top, they took the chemical tank from that little wagon that they had, they used to have to pull, and they installed it on top of that truck, and that was their first firefighting apparatus. The picture next to it on the right there, that's the other station that they opened in 1934. It was addressed 2209 North Culpeper Street. And this station sit right behind where the current station sits. The interesting thing about this, the 2209 Culpeper Street at that time was actually Ewell Street. The bottom 2 pictures depict the current fire station. It's a groundbreaking that took place in 1962, as well as the opening of the station in 1963. And the address is 4845 Lee Highway. A lot of people know it as across from the McDonald's. So let's take a look timeline at the Halls Hill Volunteer Fire Department. 1918, when they founded, one interesting thing about that is that at that time, this area was called Alexandria County. It was not even Washington County. In 1925 is when they had their first organization meeting at Mr. James Moore's house. 1927 was a big time for them. They were forced to incorporate, and this was by order of the Virginia Assembly that all fire departments in Alexandria and Arlington incorporate. They had some interesting things that happened with this. One of the Commonwealth attorney, William Gloff, actually helped them incorporate. A provision that was part of this General Assembly requirement was that when a firefighter was injured or died, if he died in a line of duty, his estate would be paid $25. 1940 was a big time for the county. This is their first fire department, when their first fire department started. Arlington County government hires its first paid firefighters to work within its volunteer companies. There were 2 companies that were excluded. Can you guess which ones they were? They were East Arlington Volunteer Fire Department, as well as the Halls Hill Volunteer Fire Department. This was a big controversy for the East Arlington Volunteer Fire Department, and they obtained an attorney, NAAC attorney, S.W. Tucker, to represent them. But it was to no avail because the county manager still disbanded them. 1944, the Halls Hill Volunteer Fire Department, which is Station 8, was renamed to Department for Arlington Fire Department Engine Number 8. And they continued to be staffed by all African Americans, and it was still a volunteer, no paid staff. 1951, Arlington County Fire Department hires their first 3 colored firefighters. And I copied that in there just like it said. There's 3, that's what they were known as, colored at that time. One of my research things that I've noticed that as the time went on, you went from colored to Negro to Black to Afro-American and now African-American, which is quite interesting. So let's look at some of the treatment that they endured. The top pictures of the fire trucks up top is interesting. This is the one on the left was a fire truck that was handed down to the Hallsville Volunteer Fire Department, Engine Company 8, at that time, that was 20 years old. The county gave it to them. They got this a piece of apparatus from the Cherrydale Fire Department, who had gotten a brand new 1948 piece. So they were gifted a 20-year-old fire truck. Interesting, I was just speaking with Captain Hartman Reed the other day, and he told me a story about that piece of apparatus that was still in operation in 1957, which is almost 30 years. And when the brakes failed on it, and they almost had an accident. The article on the bottom, article about the county deciding to pay the fire stations rental for the volunteer companies rental for their fire stations. They gave all the fire stations $65, except the Hallsville Volunteer Fire Department was paid $35. There was no reason given for the distinction. The article in the middle is actually the bylaws of the Arlington County Firemen's Association. And this association represented all of the volunteer fire companies in Arlington, except one, actually except two initially. So I'm gonna read you this little snippet of what it says. It says the membership of the association shall consist of all white volunteer fire companies in the county of Arlington. They were very specific who they wanted in the organization. The last article on the right is the article about the first entry fire and police exam. This exam came about when 1950, I believe it was, when the county approved the hiring of African-American firefighters in Arlington. Well, when they did, somebody with all their wisdom said, before we do that, we must get a test. And that's when the test came about, which backfired a little bit because not a lot of people passed, white or black. And this was so different than what they had done in the past, where in the white fire companies for 10 years, when you wanted to be hired as a firefighter, they would just hire members from their volunteer association with no test at all. So let's look at Arlington County Fire Department, segregation and integration. It's quite interesting how they stair-step integration. So in 1947, you see, baseball was integrated with with Jackie Robinson. 1948, the military was integrated. President Harry S. Truman signed an executive order to integrate, or desegregate as they called it, United States Armed Forces. 1951, this was a big time for the county, for the Blacks in Arlington, and in general, a good thing. The first 3 African-Americans were hired for Fire Station number 8. 1954, the Supreme Court banned school segregation. So the next, 1963 is the next step in integration for the fire department, which is quite interesting because a white firefighter, he agrees to work at Fire Station 8 only if he can be an officer. And they were calling that a step to integration. 1966, another step in integration. The first Black firefighter is hired and assigned to work at another fire station other than Fire Station number 8. In 1974, which is 34 years, Captain Hartman Reed is the first Afro-American officer assigned to work at another station other than Fire Station 8. So those are just a few little snippets of the things I found in my research for doing my book. There's a lot more. I just want to get through and give you just a little snapshot of what we would be talking about further in this interview. And as we move to the next section, I'd like to read a little short bios of the 2 gentlemen that I will be speaking with. The first one, Hartman Reed is a retired captain with the Arlington County Fire Department. He was one of the original first 14 African-Americans hired in the county fire department. He started his career in 1952, retiring in 1978. He actually retired the year right before I got there. During his tenure with the department, he experienced several firsts for African-Americans in the Arlington County Fire Department, including being the first African-American officer to supervise white firefighters. in another station other than the historically African-American Station 8, as well as being the first African-American station commander. That was really big time. He resides in North Arlington. Captain Reed's fire service legacy has continued through his son, who's also a retired captain with the Arlington County Fire Department, and through his granddaughter, who is currently a fire recruit with the Arlington County Fire Department. Next, you have Jerome Smith, volunteer Jerome Smith. Jerome Smith is the last living non-career volunteer member from the Halls Hill Fire Department. Mr. Smith first joined the Halls Hill Fire Department in 1955, but was not able to ride on the apparatus until he turned 21 in 1957. Volunteer Smith recalls responding to over 300 calls per year during his 17-year tenure with the Halls Hill Volunteer Fire Department. He currently resides in Caroline County, Virginia, with his wife of over 36 years, no, not 36, 66 years. Firefighter Smith's legacy as a member of the Halls Hill Fire Department can be seen through his son, Dale Smith, who became the first African-American to hold the rank of chief officer within the Arlington County Fire Department. He also has two grandsons as firefighters for the City of Alexandria Fire Department, one being recently promoted to the rank of lieutenant. So at this time, we're going to switch over to our discussion conversation with these two trailblazers and two real live heroes for me.
Dale, do you want the video on them or no?
Yes.
There we go. You're on, Dad. You're off mute.
There we go.
Okay, there.
Okay, we got to get Karen to take off mute. Well, I'll start until Karen takes the mute off. Kathy, if you could unmute Karen.
I will unmute Karen. Hold on.
Thank you.
I still have people coming into the thing, so I'm multitasking here. But let
Thank
me
you.
go in and find Karen and mute. Unmute.
Got it.
There we go.
Okay, there we go. All right, great.
Got it.
Ready. All right. Hello, gentlemen. How y'all doing?
Good, good.
Okay. Make sure you can hear me. So we're just going to have a conversation. I want you to share with everybody like y'all share with me and all of your interesting stories and knowledge that you have. So let's start out with Captain Reed. How did you become interested in the fire department and when did you join?
I joined in 1952. It was the year I was discharged from the Navy, and I really became a fire department. It sort of dropped in my lap in a sense. When I would come home on leave, I would visit the Station 8, and I had two good friends, Archie Syfax and Julian Syfax, who worked the Station 8, and I'd go by and visit with them and hang out, and they encouraged me to take the exam for the fire department while I was still in the Navy. And so when I was discharged, I had the job. I already had information that I had the job, and 3 weeks later, 3 weeks after I retired, I became a firefighter. That was September the 29th, 1952.
Wow, long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
So Volunteer Smith, same question.
Yes.
When did you join the Halls Hill Volunteer Fire Department?
I think it was back in 1955.
What made you want to become a volunteer?
Well, I like doing things to help the community. not financially, but anything you could do that would contribute to the success of the people that lived in your community. We had a thing in our community which made us very strong by helping one another. The wholesale company, people in that specific county, they survive only by helping one another, looking out for one another. So, and if you couldn't do it with money, you do it with other things. And my other thing was joining the fire department.
Okay. Captain Reed,
Yes.
when you joined your department, that was a big thing at that time. How did that affect your family's quality of life?
Well, let me tell you, it really made a big difference. Of course, when I in the Navy, I believe my pay was like $75 a month or something like that. When I came out and joined started with the fire department, it was $3,040 a year. And within a month after I became a paid fireman, the pay increased to $3,500 a year. And that was more money than teachers were making. And I think in the government at that time, what do you call them, a GS3, and the government was making like $2,750 or something. So that was big time money. And I can only say thank goodness for fire department, because they made life a lot very, very good for me.
So question I asked, we spoke of the other day, share your experience with other companies, other volunteer companies, because at that time they were pretty exclusive from keeping African-American interaction. So how was that when y'all ran calls with those companies?
Well, the only time we sort of got together was on a fire, when we were sent to a fire together. And with Station 8, it was mainly with Cherrydale or Falls Church. That's who we ran with most of the time, because the rule was that if there was a house fire, there was two engine companies and a truck company and an ambulance sent. And so if it was any house fire, there was two companies there, and that was the only intermingling that we really did.
Okay. Volunteer Smith, do you remember when you came on, did the volunteers buy your equipment or did the county?
At first, it was county, hand-me-downs from the county, and it wasn't too long after that I got new equipment.
Okay, Captain Reed, how about y'all's equipment? How was that?
That we were definitely supplied mainly by the county. I recall that each month we had to send in a requisition as to what we might need, like toilet paper, hand towels, any kind of equipment that might have to go, that we might be using. We would check, and we would send in to the county, and they would supply us that way. But it was definitely mainly the county that did our supplies. In fact, as far as the company was concerned, the volunteers, as I can remember, maybe I shouldn't even speak for that, but I don't remember them having too much money at that time.
Ooh. Let's talk about apparatus. Tell it. I remember you were just telling me just recently about that. Actually, it was the 1928 engine, which happened to be the hand-me-down. Share that story with them.
It was a 1928 American LaFrance, and it was there when I got there, of course, and I can recall one day that we had a fire in Falls Church. It was a automobile accident or a fire or something, and we were sent on it, and it was rainy, it was raining at the time. And when we took off, we running the red lights and the siren, it sort of halfway killed the battery. And by the time we got up to near the Falls Church area, well, we were on the way downhill, and we tried to put on the brakes, and the brakes were gone. And we sort of eased in to where the accident was, and we stopped before we hit anything. But I was standing up in the seat, hollering, "Get out of the way! Get out of the way!" You know, so we wouldn't get involved in the accident. And that was a pretty scary time. But anyway, I don't know why the brakes went out, but I kind of think it was with the wetness on the wheels. It just they wouldn't grab.
It could have been because it was a 30-year-old fire truck at the time.
More than likely.
Yeah.
More than likely.
So, Volunteer Smith.
Yes, sir.
When y'all ran calls with other companies, y'all, of course, you saw their apparatus and stuff, and they had newer apparatus and gear than y'all did. How did that make you feel? What did y'all think about that?
Didn't bother me at all. You do the best with what you have, and we did real good with it. So I was very proud of doing the job that we did with the equipment we had.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good. I bet y'all would have liked some new gear though. Captain Reed, can you tell us about that when you got the new hose? Why you finally decided to get some new equipment?
Yeah. As you said earlier, that we got mostly hand-me-down stuff when at the beginning. Our equipment was secondhand, came from a station that probably got something new, maybe through their volunteers or something, but they would give us an old hose we had. And one time we had a fire up on Lexington Street, and as I can remember, there was a woman that died of that fire. But anyway, the head of the fire department and the police department was on that call. He was a safety officer at the time, and he came when the fire was over. He came out and he saw the hose spraying water on the street, and he looked at it and he said to the chief of the department at that time, he said, look at that hose there, leaking. And the fire chief said, "Oh, it's mildew. That hose is mildewed." And that safety officer said, "Mildew hell. That hose is rotten. And we went back to the station that day, and that afternoon or later on, anyway, they supplied us with a whole bed load of new hose. That was the first new hose that we ever had.
The civil defense.
That's interesting. So we're going to switch back and forth. I apologize for some of this, but Volunteer Smith, tell us about the Halls Hill Fire Department and the community. How did the community perceive them?
Well, there was three things that held the community together, and you didn't do anything to embarrass the faces of the community. That was the churches, the three churches on Halls Hill, the baseball club on Halls Hill, and the fire department. Them things you did not bother, and you did not do anything to downgrade it.
So Captain Reed, so what do you remember about the whole, especially when you first came on, how proud you were to be a firefighter and how the community treated you?
The community really looked up to us, looked up to the fire department. We were definitely one of the leaders, and most things that happened on the Hill sort of went through the fire department, because quite a few of the men in in Halls Hill were either a volunteer or they hung out at the station. So we knew just what was going on all over town, and it was. I was very proud because the folks did look at us as being somebody special.
Because you were. So tell me about the territory, calls you were running and calls you weren't allowed to run. Share with some of the stories you were talking about. Tell me about those.
You know, we had, our territory was, let me see, I think it started, south was 16th Street, and to the east was let me think, we went to Wakefield Street to the east, and to the west toward Falls Church, it was Lexington Street. And we went to the end of the county, but it involved the Country Club Hills was our most exclusive area. And in that time, a lot of the area was farmland. So a lot of our calls were brush fires, or fires that was on open land. And second due ran into parts of Cherrydale and parts of Falls Church. We would be second due, but that was the area that we encountered most of the time.
Do you remember, either one of you, do you remember any calls that you weren't necessarily welcome on?
No,
not really welcome. I often thought about, there was areas, I know there was an area in Cherrydale. It was really off of Lorcom Lane. That was a very, very exclusive area at that time. And I'm thinking back, I'm not sure whether we were first due or not, or we were second due on a call in that particular area or not. But there was a house fire where a fatality took place. And I know we weren't called on it. And I often thought later, why weren't we? Because we were closer than any other company, I mean, other than Cherrydale. We were the second closest company, but whether it was our second due territory or not, I can't say today. But that call really sticks in my mind because the firefighter that he went to fire school with me, and he was number 1 in the class, and I was number 2 in the class, and that was a very sad time in the department. I think it was their first loss ever that we had as a fireman on duty.
Volunteer Smith, share with us one or two of your most memorable calls that you can think about.
Well, we went to, we were second due in a house fire in Falls Church, but Falls Church was out of the house. They was out on another call, so we were actually first due in there. And it was a 2-story large home that had rooms in the home. It was a rooming house, and it had a lot of rooms in it. And this was on a Saturday night, and the house set about 200 feet back off the road on the lawn. So when we pulled up, and like I said, we were first due in that, one half of the whole house, and it was 2-story, was on fire. I mean, it was blazing, just like you cut it in half. And we entered the house from the ground. You could go in the first floor, standing on the ground. And me and my partner, Lawrence Williams, I took the nozzle, and he gave it to me as I entered the house, and we broke the window out, of course, but it was totally off. And so I opened the nozzle up and sprayed it down. You couldn't see anything in there, and it was really hot. And after the other companies came and they lit up the grounds and everything, and fans and everything, and the smoke sort of cleared out. And I had also extinguished the room that I was in. But when I was backing out of the room, I was backed out. It was a radiator under the window, which I went into. And that radiator was so hot, it burned a hole in my boots. No, it did. It actually burned a hole in my boots. But anyhow, there was a folding cart there. And the folding cart had what I thought was a mannequin on it. He was leaning, trying to get out of, well, I know now that it was a man, but at first I thought it was a mannequin. So I grabbed him and to make sure it was put out. But when I grabbed him by the head, his hair came right off in my hand.
Wow, that's a rough one.
Yeah.
Captain Reed,
Yes.
tell us about, I remember you were telling about a call down in Roslyn that you didn't get sent on.
That was very, very comical. That time it was I believe it was my first year in the department, and it was a oil refinery right now where the Key Bridge Marriott is, and there's that oil refinery caught on fire, and it was a brutal, I mean brutal night. And me and my partner, it was only two of us working that night, and we were waiting to be what we called the bells hit, and we waiting for them to send. And we they kept calling different alarms, you know, first alarm, second alarm, third alarm, and I believe even companies from DC and Alexandria might have been on that fire, but they skipped right over us with, we heard Station 6. When we heard Station 6 go by us, we knew that we weren't going to be called. And my partner made his famous statement to me. He said, "Thank God for Jim Crow, because that night you did not want to be out in that weather. It was extremely cold."
Oh, that is funny.
And
So-
Dale, I want to tell you one other thing about which made Company 8 unique,
Mhm.
that we policed ourselves. Really, we held monthly meetings, and anything that we saw was headed in the wrong direction or we knocked it in the bud right then and there. So we did nothing to embarrass Station 8.
All right.
Man,
That's good. That's really good. So I'm switching up subjects a little bit. When, as we talked about the other day, when John Bassett came to Station 8, he was the first time a white firefighter was assigned there as an officer, at least. I think they had worked there on detail before. So again, tell me what that was like, Captain Reed.
well, John, I would really like to correct that just a little bit. John really, he was the first officer to come into the station, white officer, but there was four young white recruits who got there about 3 months before John did. But when John Bassett came with us, he was I got along with him very well. He was a big help, and we just got along pretty good, very good, very good. He was, I know before that, he had a sort of a reputation that today we would call white supremacist thinking. But while at the station, I'll have to say he controlled himself, and he never caused any problems. And he was an asset. I would say he was an asset to the company.
Tell about the privates.
Do you, Volunteer Smith, do you remember John Bassett and when
Yes.
he came up to Station 8?
Yes, he was on, Captain Reed was off that night that fire in Falls Church happened. That was the first big fire we had when he was there. So he was there that night that guy burned up. He was officer in charge that night.
So Captain Reed, when the reason John came there, because he wanted a promotion. So this was doing this when it had been integrated. Before then, explain to him how the testing took place at Station 8, how the promotions took place.
Yeah, we all, the county took the same tests, but actually Station 8 competed against themselves. It was those that were eligible to take the test in Station 8 all competed against themselves, and the white station competed against the seven other white stations at that time, and they all competed against themselves, and it just happened that there was a couple in our company that had higher scores than some of the whites that weren't promoted. And John Bassett had made a statement that he'd have been glad to go to Station 8 as an officer. And so I guess the next time they took the test, I guess that was something they remembered, and they sent him there anyway.
So I was just thinking, so when they integrated per se with John Bassett, that actually hurt the guys at Station 8 because there were less promotional spots because no one got promoted.
That's right. Then we competed against the whole county. That when I made captain, that was the next test. When I made captain, I competed against the whole county, and I was very proud that I was able to have a score good enough to be selected as a captain.
Interesting. So let's switch a little bit on there. Because you were the first African-American officer to work outside of Station 8, how was that different or similar to when John Bassett came to 8?
I guess in reverse, it could have been about the same thing, because while working at Station 8, I felt very secure. It was my territory. But when I went into Station 4, I knew I was the only Black in the station. But let me say that they had privates. They had privates in the station before, Black privates before me. In fact, it was my son who worked at the station before I got there. He was transferred. He didn't work under me. He was transferred when I moved in, but I felt that I had to stay on my P's and Q's, and I tried not to cause any problems, and I don't think that I did. But anyway, it was I was very proud to have been selected to work out of Station 4. That was the headquarters company.
So you're a bigger history. You supervised the first woman firefighter in the country.
Yeah. That's something I can say. Right, I was the first one, and she was the first firefighter in the world, as I can recall. And I didn't supervise her, and but she ran into the same kinds of problems that as a woman that I ran into as a African American, and so I think that I probably coddled her more than the rest of the crew, because I knew what she was going through. You know, the firemen, the firefighters just didn't believe that she was as good a firefighter as the males were. It was always, you heard that the stories all the time. If I was caught in a fire, and did she have the strength to be able to take me out if I was, caught inside or something? And we as African Americans, ran into that same thing, that they just didn't, the other, I don't say all of them, but it was a lot of the firefighters who just didn't believe that we had the same kind of courage as they did. And in fact, I think if you look through history, in World War I and World War II, Blacks didn't go to the front lines because they didn't believe that they had the courage to fight. And so we were used as runners of the, or we carried equipment or something, you know, the red ball, you know, the trucks that carried the equipment was the big thing in World War II. But I don't think there was too many of them, too many African Americans who were on the front line at that time. And that same kind of feeling went in the fire department when I got there.
So let me switch for a little bit to Volunteer Smith. Tell us about the civil rights movement, the sit-ins, and your experience with that. You remember the story Marguerite likes to hear you tell.
Yep.
Well, it with the night that they had to sit in at the drug fair drugstore in Cherrydale, which was right in front of Station 3 in Cherrydale, the drugstore was. And they had a lunch counter in there, and the kids from Howard University, about 12 of them came in to demonstrate there, and they pulled a set-in there. And the drugstore had closed for business. It was open, but not for business, because the police had roped off an area around the lunch counter in there where these kids sat. And it was wall to wall white people in there. I mean, wall to wall. They're standing and they were shouting profanity to the black people in there, and they were using some terrible languages. They didn't do anything physically, but they was using some pretty bad language to them. So this was about 9:15, 9:15, and the drugstore closed at 10 o'clock. Well, it was 4 policemen inside there with the crowd, and I got the sense that the police was a part of the crowd. That's the feeling I had, but I didn't say anything. But when it came 9:45, the police inside told me, my buddy, that to pull the car in front of the drugstore so the kids wouldn't have to walk off the curb to get in the cars, to minimize any danger to them. So I went to get my car, which was parked in the street right next to the drugstore, 2 blocks long, in a dead end, at two blocks up there. Well, when I got halfway up the street where my car was, and it was dark, only 2 street lights on the whole section there, and they was a block apart, so you couldn't see anything hardly there. But I could hear footsteps behind me. And then I heard the language. Hey, you so-and-so, so. And I paid no attention to it, but at that time I could step out a little bit, so I got in a little spot. And so They said, you heard me? Yeah, I said, I heard you, but these feet has got to go. So I went on up to my car, the last car at the dead end, where my car was parked. And I had my keys in my hand because I ain't had no time to be waiting and searching for them. So I got in my car and pulled back down the street, and there's a traffic light right there, coming back out to Lee Highway. Well, these guys, it was 5 of them in the car. And when the light changed, I pulled out on Lee Highway, had to go down the opposite way and turn around, make a U-turn to come around on the side of the drugstore so I could be in front of it. But they had police all out there. They were all over the place out there, direct traffic, and they didn't let anybody stop. You couldn't stop at all. They kept you going. But it was a breakdown through communication, Dale, because the cops inside told me to go get to my car. But the guy, when I got outside and pulled in front of the drugstore, the cops there told me, move along. So I was holding my head out the window to tell him that the other officers told me to pull in front of the store to pick up the kids. He didn't want to hear that. He said, I said, move the F on. So I said, I'm in a world of trouble. And, so I stepped on it because he was approaching my car as he was talking to, and the officer were. And so I moved on up the Lee Highway, and them guys in the souped up car, they were right behind me. And I got up about 2 blocks, and they caught up with me and threw something in the back of my car. It came through the window. And I don't know what that was till the day, but it exploded. Whatever it was, it exploded. Now I got to get a new gear, but they were so close on my tail, I couldn't pull the thing down. I ran in 2nd gear because I didn't want to lose no momentum going through the. Anyhow, I got on up to Lee Highway and Glebe Road, and I went through the light. I must have been doing 70 miles per hour. But so after I got across Glebe Road and Lee Highway, I sort of broke it down because I ain't running no more because I'm at the firehouse just a block away. So I pulled in at the firehouse, and the guys were all sitting out at the firehouse because it was in the summertime. It was hot. And they were sitting out there, a whole bunch of them. We had called in volunteers, so there was plenty of firemen there. They expected trouble. So it was a lot of them standing around, and they were talking this thing, and they said to me, what happened, Smitty? I told them the story that I was chased out of Cherrydale. And then, so that was it. But that was
that's a good ending. I know the real ending, but that's a good ending. Let me Captain Reed, tell us about your buddy George Rockwell. Or
that was quite an experience. That with having him come by, he and one of his henchmen came by, and the henchman was dressed in the Nazi regalia, had everything, along with the 45 at his side. And he came into the station, and there was 3 of us working at that time. And he came in, and he wanted, his reason was that he wanted us firemen, to encourage the Halls Hill community to go back to Africa, because he was running for president. He 2 years before or something, but near that time, he was supposed to be he was going to run for president. And when he made president, he was going to send all blacks back to Africa. And he wanted us to get ahead of it by, we're going, and he's going to give us a plot of land and $10,000. And so we asked, where do you plan? How are you going to get the land in Africa? He said there was going to be reparation from the war. A lot of these countries owed us from the war, and he was going to take the land and give us the land. And so he says, how about the $10,000? How are you going to give all this $10,000? He said, well, the Jews own the banks, and we're going to take over the banks, and that's where we're going to get the money to be able to send you. And but anyway, we had quite a talk with him, and he finally left out of there with no problems. But I'm pretty sure he was pretty serious about us encouraging the community to go to go to Africa.
Y'all laughed.
But anyway, that was about the extent of the visit with him.
So this is my last question for y'all. I'll start with Volunteer Smith. So what do you want people to know about Fire Station 8 and the men that serve there?
I think if you formed an organization, that you couldn't find a better bunch of guys to do the job. They was they help one another. What you didn't know, they knew, and they helped one another. They looked out for one another, and they were a great bunch of guys. I was real younger than most of them in there, so I learned a lot from them, and I appreciate being part of that organization.
Good. Captain Reed.
Yeah.
Same question. Y'all work with some real amazing people. So what would you like people to know about Station 8 and some of the men you served with?
Let me say from the beginning that we started as the first fireman on. We didn't have any training. When I came out of the Navy, I went right into the station. And now I'm not sure, but maybe I think that the one who came on before me might have went to fire school or not, but we started out sort of on our own, and what we learned it on our own. And the later that I think in my first year in the department, I went to a fire school, and that's where I got trained, a little training. But most of our training was acquired on our own. And but anyway, at the station, we knew that we had to be extra good to stand. We needed to stand out and be above the other companies if we could. I'm gonna tell you a little story that we heard from some of the firemen. They said when they built the new station, the tile in the tile that they put into the new station was white. In the other stations, it was green. And they said they put that white tile in there because they wanted to see whether we could keep it clean. Because your boots would make black marks on it with no problem. But I'll tell you, we were so proud of that new station that we kept it spotless. We were always proud of the way it looked, because the floor stayed waxed, and it was well taken care of, and we were proud of it.
Well, good. I said that was my last question, but you made me think of one more, because we spoke about this other day. I'm looking for the history and the information about Hallsville Volunteer Fire Department and Station 8, and it's not readily available. It's not nobody talked about it, because me being I call a kid of Station 8, I was there when I was little, but I never knew the history. How come what do you think was the reason why people never shared the history? Because it's got great history, great legacy.
Well,
I really don't think they
are you
knew.
asking me?
Yeah.
Either one. I'm gonna take one at a time. Go ahead. I'm gonna let Firefighter Smith go first. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I don't think they knew the history of it. They'll tell you the truth. All they knew that, like I stated before, look, whatever happened in Station 8, you stayed in Station 8 because there was nothing that went along in Station 8 that we didn't knock in the bud by policing it ourselves. So you couldn't find another white station that could say anything negative about Station 8 unless it was a lie, because whatever happened in Station 8, we kept it in Station 8.
Okay. Captain Reed?
Yeah, I go along with Smitty. But I think at that time, they just didn't give the history of the African Americans in the county. There was a whole lot of things that even the history of Halls Hill. I was surprised listening to you tell it, because I didn't know, and I spent all these years in the county. I didn't know about it. It was just never talked about. But I'd say we were glad to have been hired. And I've always give Arlington County credit for being so forward to have even considered hiring blacks at the time, because in the 50s, I don't know, a lot of people don't know, but we weren't thought of too much, and to get that kind of a job that paid as well as it did was something special. And so I thank Arlington County for giving me my life anyway, because coming up, I definitely came up poor, and I didn't believe I would be able to own a bicycle. And it helped me to own 2 houses and many new automobiles, and so I can lay it all on Arlington County for having given me the good life that I have had, and I'm very, very happy for it.
Well, thank you. I want to thank you, gentlemen, again for, you're my heroes. When I say that, I'm not kidding. You really are. Captain Reed, you preceded me. Unfortunately, I did not get to work with you. You left right before I came there. And of course, my daddy is my daddy. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to just thank y'all. I want to thank the Arlington Historical Society for allowing this presentation, as well as all of my cohorts. I have Tanya Graham. She keeps me straight. She's keeping me straight at the moment, matter of fact. I have so many, Camilla Ham provided information, Wilma Jones, just a whole host. I know I'm forgetting people. So thank everybody. And
Dale, do you have time for a few questions?
I do.
Okay.
Okay, I'll take it from there. Thank you guys so much. That was
Amazing,
so interesting. Yeah.
amazing.
I learned so much this evening.
Thank
I'm
you.
just gonna quickly scroll through some of the questions. You sort of responded about calls outside of Halls Hills, but did other stations respond to fires within Halls Hill?
Oh yes, the county had set up what is called first and second due. We would first, second, or third due to the different areas, and according to where your station was, you ran calls if there was in those areas. It was always two companies. Any house fire, there was two companies that responded, plus a ladder truck and an ambulance, and it still goes that way today. And so other companies did come to our area, and in fact, they came into our area while we were sitting in the station at the time. In the very early years, they were sent to our area, and the dispatcher didn't send us.
Troublesome. Yeah. Mr. Smith, you talked about that terrible fire in Falls Church. For either of you, is there another memorable fire that you would want to talk about?
Yes, it was the Amco transmission place on Wilson Boulevard. Right next to there used to be a car dealer there, Chrysler car dealers, and there was an alley in between the car dealership and the Amco transmission place. And it was one Saturday night, around 10 o'clock, and we got a call on second due there, but with actually first due there. But when we pulled up on the scene, the reflection of the fire that was in the Amco building right across from the car dealership reflected into the car dealership, and we laid a line to, of course, it looked like all of the cars in that showroom floor was on fire. But anyhow, that place burned to the ground. Amco transmission. It took us over 8 hours to put it out.
Wow. Amy Breedlove has a question about when did fire hydrants first come out, so that you didn't have to use chemical substances anymore?
Fire hydrants were in the area when I got here. That was the one thing that you had to learn. You know, it was a big thing to learn the streets and where the hydrants were. And I can tell you a story about us. We had a big snowstorm. I don't know. We had 2 or 3 feet of snow that came down, and it covered the fire hydrants. And we were sent out to clean the hydrants off. And that was throughout the county. It was a lot of, in our first due area, that was a lot of hydrants. And one of the, I recall on Harrison Street, Harrison was they had made it kind of wide because they had built Williamsburg Junior High School at the time, and they widened out Harrison Street, and there was new homes being built along there. So from the middle of the street where the cars were running, and to the fire hydrant, it might have been 8 feet of snow that you had to clean away to get to the hydrant. So we had the old fire truck that you saw, that 28 Miracle of France, and what we thought we had, it was chains there were chains on the wheel to get the traction and stuff. What we was going to do was take a run, and we would swing in close to the fire hydrant and sort of have the fire truck move a lot of the snow. And one time, at one of the fire hydrants, we ended up on top of the snow, and we were stuck there. We couldn't go on radio and have them send the other fire truck out because we didn't want to know what had happened. And so we had to go into somebody's house and use the telephone and call the station and have them come up and pull us off of that mound of snow. But that was a funny situation that happened at the time. We were sort of having fun. We would before we make this run, we'd say, "Get him, Ollie!" You know, we were sort of like riding horses or something into it, and it was a little embarrassing.
Jessica, to answer your question about the hydrants, I believe the first hydrants in Arlington were around 1934, but you got to remember the African-American communities always got the infrastructure at the last moment. So that wasn't always the case for Halls Hill.
Gotcha. Okay. All right.
And another, there was another thing about fire hydrants that I had no idea when I first got in there, that each hydrant delivers different amounts of water. It's according to where it is. Some of them were 500 gallons a minute, and others 1,000 or 2,000 or something. And they were, after I got there, they painted the tops to let you know what kind of a delivery that plug would give you. And before that happened, we had it showed some pictures of it at the beginning. Dale showed some pictures of the store. There was a Hicks store, and above Hicks store there was a pool hall. And we in the station used to sit down and figure out, it looked like something that might catch fire. And so we were pre-planning how to fight this fire. If ever that building caught fire. And so it was right across the street from the fire station. And so we had figured what we would do is, if it ever caught fire, we were going to pull out, we'd drop our lines and go up the street. There was a plug a block away at 22nd Road and Culpeper Street, which was just a block away. And we were going to leave a plug that was on the corner of Lee Highway and Culpeper Street for the second due company. And so when that fire happened, we did what we planned and went up and hooked up with that plug and at 22nd Road, and we charged the lines. And by that time, Cherrydale had come and got on the plug on Lee Highway. And as soon as Cherrydale hooked up, it took the water away from the plug on 22nd Street, and our lines went dead. And so that was one of all that pre-planning that we made was for naught.
Best laid plans.
Yeah, but
yeah. So now here's another question. Annette Bambo would like to know what kind of racist attitudes did the African-American firefighters have to deal with from the white people they were trying to help?
You could tell some stories on that.
what?
Dale,
You want to get in there, Smitty?
No, you take that and tell him about that one up on over in Westover, Artie.
Yeah.
Oh,
Go ahead, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah, well, I think in most cases, we got along well, but but it was a funny thing. I hate to, it sort of looked bad for me. We came in on a fire in Westover. It was an apartment fire on Wilson Boulevard. And when I pulled up, the first due company had pulled a lady out of her apartment and was in the vestibule doing CPR. And when we came in, the captain of that station said to me, he said, "This lady needs mouth to mouth." And listen, that lady was looking, it was haggard. She was haggard looking. It was coming from her nose, and it was as bad. But I looked down there, and I really heard the ambulance coming in from Falls Church. I heard the siren, so I knew she was going to get help, and she had help right there with the fireman working on her. But when he said that she needs mouth to mouth, I said to my men, "Come on, we went into the apartment and fought the fire rather than have to deal mouth to mouth in that situation."
How about the lady on the toilet? Tell that one.
Huh?
The lady on the toilet. Tell that one. Uncle Julian, the lady on the toilet. The lady on the toilet.
That was Julian.
Yeah, tell the story though. She wanna know.
My daughter's telling me to tell a story about one of my fireman friends. He was on another shift. They had a fire right behind the fire station. It was, and they rolled in there, and there was place was full of smoke. And by the time they cleared the smoke out, that he saw there was a lady sitting on the commode, and she looked up at him and said, he used the N-word and said, "What are you doing in my house?" That was the thing. There was, you asked how we got along with the people. Most of the people were pretty good, but there were still those that had the Nazi, we call the Nazi thinking. We've had calls where they wouldn't even let us go into the house, and the second due company had to put the fire out in the house rather than let us go in. But that was very rare, very rare.
Okay, well, that's good to hear, that it was rare. David Pavlitz says, "Great presentation. We're grateful for your service." And he's using an acronym that I don't know, but he says, "Were there any LODD in the fire department?"
Line of duty deaths.
Ah, okay.
Were there any line of duty?
What was that, Dale? I didn't hear. I don't know that one.
Line of duty. When Captain Reed spoke of one earlier in his when I was talking about, it was a call that they weren't sent on, that a firefighter died in.
Right.
Yeah, that was that one really hurt, and I'm sorry I couldn't say much about that fire because I don't know all the logistics on it, but I do know that I felt that we should have been second due on that fire, and we were never called, and the reason why he passed, he was a small built fella, and he crawled into the hole, a hole going into the attic, and he got hung up in there, and why the second fireman never went with him, I don't know, because I recall, you had a buddy. Anytime you had online, you had a buddy with you, and it was two of you rather than just one. But maybe Dale, maybe you know more about that call than I do at this time.
No, you summed it up pretty good. Go ahead, Jessica.
Okay, well, that's most of our questions, except for one that I can't ignore, and that is, Dale, can we learn more about your book?
Well,
How's it going?
yes, you will. The book is, hopefully it should be really interesting. I'm going to ask, I was going to put a plug. I need more pictures. I need some pictures of the old fire station. Somebody has them somewhere in Arlington. And
I need to look through our pictures. I think.
so any pictures that you have, anybody, I will just make a copy. I don't want to keep them. I will return. So you will get my book soon, before the station opens.
So when do you expect to have the book published? What's your timeline?